There comes a moment when hesitation becomes betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. A quiet, silent betrayal that happens in the privacy of your own mind. When you hesitate on the calling, when you delay the decision, when you know what you must do, and yet you wait. And in that delay, dreams die, destinies detour, because life doesn't move for the indecisive. History was not written by those who waited until they felt ready. It was carved by those who moved while they were still afraid, who acted while their knees trembled, who stood up even when doubt screamed louder than courage. And the reason most people stay stuck is not because they lack talent, not because they lack time, but because they never decide. They dance around their calling, they flirt with purpose, they daydream of change, but they never decide. You see, there is a power in decision that most people will never taste. The moment your mind is made up, everything changes. The confusion clears. The hesitation fades. The universe shifts in your favor. Because life bends for the committed. That's not wishful thinking. That's the law of creation. That's how mountains move. That's how vision turns into victory. A decided mind cuts through chaos like a blade. And the tragedy is, most people never realize they're one decision away. One decision away from discipline. One decision away from the life they pray for. One decision away from becoming who they were born to be. But they keep rehearsing the reasons, the fears, the past, the what-ifs, and in doing so they reinforce the very prison they're trying to escape. So let me ask you something, and I mean this with fire in my voice. What decision are you still postponing? That's already costing you your future. You know the one I'm talking about. The relationship you know is draining you. The job that's suffocating your soul. The dream you keep postponing until someday. The life you want is on the other side of the decision you're refusing to make. Not because you can't, but because you haven't. And every moment you stall, you train your mind to tolerate mediocrity. You teach your spirit that comfort is king. But hear me now, greatness never grows in comfort. It grows in the soil of risk, sacrifice, and decisions that feel impossible until they're made. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times before the light bulb. 10,000. But you know what he had a decided mind. He didn't try to invent the light bulb. He decided he would. And the world bent to that decision. Henry Ford was ridiculed for trying to build a car for the common man. Impossible, they said. Stupid, they mocked. But Ford made a decision that the future belonged to the brave. And today, you drive his dream. Walt Disney was fired for lacking imagination. Yes, Walt Disney. But he had something his critics didn't. He had resolve. A decision so anchored in faith that not even bankruptcy or rejection could derail it. Every empire you admire was once built on a decision that looked ridiculous to the world. The question is, do you have the courage to decide before the world applauds? Can you decide while it's still dark? Can you decide when no one's clapping? Can you decide when fear is loud and proof is absent? Because if you can, the world has no choice but to move. You were not built to live on the fence. Indecision is the thief of destiny. It's how people die with dreams still inside them. It's how generations go unhealed. It's how legacies get buried beneath what could have been. And make no mistake, every time you avoid a decision, you're still deciding. You're deciding to stay where you are. You're deciding that comfort is worth more than calling. You're deciding that fear gets the final vote. But if you ever truly decide, if you ever lock in, if you ever say, "This is who I am. This is where I'm going, and nothing will stop me," then brace yourself because your whole world will start rearranging. People will fall away. Doors will open. Clarity will come, but not before. God does not anoint the undecided. because power only flows through conviction. Let the weak try, let the world wait. But if you're going to move mountains, if you're going to shake the ground you walk on, then your mind must be made up. Half commitments don't change the world. Lukewarm faith doesn't call down miracles. The floodgates of heaven only open when the soul is sure. And yes, there will be fear, always. But fear is not the enemy, indecision is. Fear will always show up. But if your decision is louder than your doubt, fear has no choice but to follow your lead. So stop feeding fear. Stop waiting for every variable to be perfect. Stop hoping someone else gives you permission to live. Your permission is already here in the form of your decision. And the second you make it truly fully without escape routes, the atmosphere will shift. That's not magic. That's alignment. That's faith in action. That's the power of a decided mind. So let's talk about why most people never get there. Let's expose the lie that has stolen too many futures. They think clarity comes before decision. They sit and wait for a sign, for a voice, for a moment so obvious that fear dissolves and doubt evaporates. But that moment never comes, because clarity is not the predecessor to decision. It is the product of it. You don't get clarity, then you move, and clarity catches up. You don't become confident, then you act, and confidence arrives. The world has sold you a false order. When you're ready, then you go. No, you go, and in going, you become ready. That's why so few people rise, because rising looks reckless from the ground. It looks foolish to the fearful. It looks insane to the safe. And so they wait. They wait their way into mediocrity. They wait themselves into anxiety. They wait so long, they forget they were ever called at all. But not you. You didn't come this far just to think about it. You came here to cross over. You came here to decide to burn the bridge, to kill the backup plan, to write your name in fire and say, I'm not waiting on confidence. I'll build it in motion. I'm not asking for permission. I am the permission. Because the truth is the old version of you, the one that tolerated fear, that flirted with doubt, that pretended confusion, has to die for the real you to live. Deciding demands a burial. It demands you bury who you've been, to become who you were born to be. You cannot carry both. One is a costume, the other is your crown. And the moment you decide, the costume starts to burn. The mask starts to fall. And who you really are steps forward, bold, bare, undeniable. But be warned, the moment you decide, the resistance will rise. Life will test the integrity of your commitment. You'll face storms not because you're weak, but because you're about to become unstoppable. You'll be misunderstood, laughed at, ignored, even betrayed. But listen carefully. Resistance is not rejection. It's refinement. It's life sculpting you for what you said you want. You said you want greatness. Then life will demand greatness from you. You said you want to lead. Then life will strip you of the need to be liked. You said you want purpose. Then life will pull you away from every place you settled for comfort. This isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's the cost of access. You don't get a future worth fighting for without becoming a person who can carry it. And that transformation starts with decision. Your body may not feel ready. Your bank account may not look ready. Your environment may not seem ready, but your spirit knows. Your spirit has been whispering for years, move, build, become. And you keep drowning it out with logic, with what-ifs, with someday. Let me say this loud for the parts of you that are still doubting. Someday is a lie. There is no perfect time. There is only now. There is only this breath, this moment, this shot at freedom. And freedom doesn't knock politely. It demands that you walk through the fire and say, even if it burns, I'm going. Because indecision is the fire. Every day you don't decide, you're already burning in quiet regret, in silent anxiety, in the ache of unexpressed potential. That's the price of waiting, but the reward of deciding everything. Because once you decide, truly decide, your life becomes unrecognizable. Not overnight, not easily, but inevitably. Because a decided mind doesn't stop. It doesn't shrink. It doesn't retreat when things get dark. It becomes brighter. When life throws pain, it grows perspective. When failure shows up, it sharpens focus. When doors close, it kicks down new ones. The world does not make room for the hesitant, but it cannot ignore the decided. So choose, not halfway, not I'll try, not we'll see. Choose with the kind of conviction that makes people uncomfortable, that scares your small self, that announces to heaven and hell alike, I will no longer apologize for the fire inside of me. Because that fire, that's your edge. That's your birthright. That's your divine assignment, begging to be lived out loud. You don't owe the world another excuse. You owe yourself a decision, and you're one breath away. There's a force more powerful than talent, more reliable than luck, more transformative than knowledge. And that force is resolve. See, when you resolve, truly resolve, you shut every back door. You eliminate escape routes. You burn the what-ifs and erase the maybes. A resolved person is dangerous because they are not dabbling. They are not tiptoeing through options. They're not entertaining exit strategies or looking for applause. They are committed in a way that scares the average. Because resolve isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It just moves like a current through a canyon. Silent, unstoppable, carving new paths where there once were none. People will call it obsession. Let them. People will call it delusion. Let them. They can't comprehend what it feels like to be fully lit from within. To be so connected to your calling that resistance only fuels you. To have such unwavering belief that facts don't stand a chance against faith. That's what a decided mind is, faith in motion. It doesn't need to see the whole staircase. It just takes the first step and trusts that if the dream is divine, the path will be provided. But let me be clear, that path will not be paved with comfort. It will demand everything shallow in you to die. It will expose your excuses. It will confront your cycles. It will test your character in silence, in suffering, in solitude. Because that's where true decision is proven, when no one is clapping, when the lights are off and the progress is invisible, when you're doing the work in private while the world laughs in public. You will be mocked before you are respected. You will be doubted before you are admired. But that is the tax of becoming undeniable. The tax of carrying a vision no one else sees. And the truth is, that's why most never get there. Not because they weren't capable, but because they didn't stay. They made an emotional decision, not a spiritual one. An emotional decision is loud. It's hype. It's the Monday motivation, the conference high, the fleeting burst of "let's go." But a spiritual decision, it's quiet, it's deep, it doesn't announce, it anchors. It's not based on mood, it's not dependent on outcome. It is a vow between you and the version of you that refuses to die without being seen. That's the power of a decided mind. It turns "I hope" into "I build." It turns "someday" into "this day." It turns "I don't know how" into "I'll figure it out" or "die trying." That is the kind of energy that splits seas, that levels mountains, that resurrects dreams long buried under fear and fatigue. And maybe that's you. Maybe you buried something holy inside of you. Maybe you were told it was too big, too bold, too impossible. And so you folded it into the corners of your soul and tried to live small. But it never died. That whisper, that vision, that pull at 2 a.m., it never left. And it won't. Because purpose is stubborn. It will wait decades silently, tapping until you finally remember who you are, until you finally say, no more negotiating with fear, no more worshiping comfort, no more apologizing for wanting more. Your life isn't asking for perfection, it's asking for a decision. And that decision is the first miracle. The moment you decide, truly decide, you align yourself with power unseen. You activate divine assistance. You shift unseen things into motion. People will call it coincidence, but it's not. It's confirmation that once you moved, the universe moved with you, because motion is magnetic, faith is fire, and a decided mind. That's the match that ignites everything. You can't halfway believe and expect full miracles. You can't be lukewarm and expect life to hand you a fire. The world doesn't respond to indecision. It ignores it. It waits silently for you to either show up with conviction or fade back into the crowd of the almost decided. The universe doesn't move for hesitation. It moves for boldness. It moves for people who stop flinching when it gets hard. For those who keep walking even when the path disappears. Because that kind of faith rewrites reality. And that kind of person, they don't wait for proof. They become the proof. Listen carefully. Every breakthrough you've ever begged for is standing behind one decision. The decision to stop questioning your worth, to stop looking for permission, to stop outsourcing your identity to opinions that were never qualified to define you. A decided mind doesn't beg for support, it builds it. It doesn't need applause, it earns it. And the most dangerous kind of person is not the loud one. It's not the flashy one. It's the one you never saw coming. Because they weren't performing. They were preparing. While everyone else was talking, they were building in silence. While others sought validation, they made vows in private no one else could hear. And now they don't hope for opportunities, they create them. Now they don't beg for doors to open, they build new ones. That's the power of internal authority. When you no longer need the outside world to confirm what God already whispered inside you. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. And alignment looks like peace in the face of chaos. Like clarity in the middle of confusion, like momentum in the absence of motivation. Because once your mind is truly made up, you become untouchable by circumstances. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer chase, you attract. You don't move for attention, you move with intention. Because here's the truth, no one wants to say out loud. Most people are addicted to indecision. They don't actually want to choose. Because the moment you choose, you become accountable. No more blaming the economy. No more pointing at your parents. No more saying, I'm just not ready. A decided mind removes all those exits. It locks the door to excuses and sets the building on fire. So you can't go back. You must become. And that scares people because becoming costs everything you built in survival mode. It requires you to release identities you clung to for safety. It forces you to bury the version of yourself that was built to be liked instead of built to be legendary. But that's the great exchange. That's the price of power. You don't become unstoppable by accident. You become it by decision. By choosing to live in alignment with what your future demands, not what your past conditioned you to believe. And you can feel the moment it happens when your spirit stops asking for permission and starts issuing declarations. When your voice no longer trembles and your hands no longer shake. When you walk into the same rooms that used to intimidate you and suddenly realize you no longer shrink to fit. Because you didn't come to be tolerated. You came to transform. And that moment is not some fairy tale climax. It's the result of 1,000 micro decisions you made when no one was watching. It's what happens when you keep choosing to rise, to recommit, to rebuild, to believe again. Even after life gave you every reason to quit, even when the results weren't showing, even when it felt like no one believed in you. That's when the shift happens. Not when the check clears, not when the crowd cheers, but when your soul finally catches up with your spirit and whispers, "I was waiting for you to believe." The world doesn't reward the most talented, it rewards the most certain. You've seen it before. People with half your ability, half your heart, living lives 10 times louder. Not because they're better, but because they decided they belonged. Confidence is not born, it's built. And you don't build it by waiting for someone to crown you worthy. You build it by waking up each day and crowning yourself. Let me tell you something the world won't. You're not confused. You're just scared of what happens when you stop hiding behind confusion. You're not lost. You're avoiding the cost of being found. You don't need another book, another course, another guru. You need a made-up mind. A mind that says, "I will stop lying to myself. I will stop tolerating mediocrity. I will stop building a life around fear and then praying for peace." Because you cannot build your future with bricks of avoidance. You cannot pray for courage while feeding your fears a 3-course meal every night. You cannot ask for purpose while clinging to the very patterns that are poisoning your potential. A decided mind is surgical. It cuts away what's no longer aligned. It amputates what doesn't serve where you're going. It lets go of the relationships that comfort your wounds but kill your growth. Because here's the hard truth. Not everyone deserves a seat in your becoming. Some people are allergic to your healing. Some are addicted to the version of you that stayed small so they could feel tall. But a decided mind doesn't shrink to keep company. It elevates, even if it means walking alone. Because loneliness isn't the enemy misalignment is. And if the cost of clarity is solitude, so be it. Let the silence be your sanctuary. Let the isolation be your initiation. This is what separates the almost from the absolute, the dabblers from the disciplined, the dreamers from the doers. It's not talent, it's not luck. It's the decision to go all in when it would be easier to blend in. That's where power lives. Power doesn't show up in the perfect plan. It shows up in the person who keeps showing up even when the plan falls apart, even when the door doesn't open, even when the timeline stretches longer than expected. You think it's taking too long. What if it's you that's been delaying the breakthrough by dancing with doubt? You say you're waiting on alignment, but alignment isn't something you find. It's something you decide. It's not the universe that's been unclear. It's your own hesitation echoing back at you. And every time you hesitate, you train the world to treat you as optional. You teach life to give you leftovers. But not anymore. This is the season where you move like your calling matters, where you no longer play small and call it humility, where you stop editing your greatness for other people's comfort. A decided mind doesn't ask, "Who am I to do this?" It declares, "Who am I not to?" Because if not you, who if not now, when you're not behind, you're not broken. You're just being asked to choose, to decide, to rise not when it's easy, but when everything in you screams to stay safe. That is the battleground of the exceptional. The inner war between the soul that remembers why you came here and the mind that's been trained to survive. And the only way to win is to decide, to finally decide. The world doesn't reward the most talented. It rewards the most certain. You've seen it before. People with half your ability, half your heart living lives 10 times louder. Not because they're better, but because they decided they belong. Confidence is not born, it's built. And you don't build it by waiting for someone to crown you worthy. You build it by waking up each day and crowning yourself. Let me tell you something the world won't. You're not confused. You're just scared of what happens when you stop hiding behind confusion. You're not lost. You're avoiding the cost of being found. You don't need another book, another course, another guru. You need a made-up mind. A mind that says, I will stop lying to myself. I will stop tolerating mediocrity. I will stop building a life around fear and then praying for peace. Because you cannot build your future with bricks of avoidance. You cannot pray for courage while feeding your fears a 3-course meal every night. You cannot ask for purpose while clinging to the very patterns that are poisoning your potential. A decided mind is surgical. It cuts away what's no longer aligned. It amputates what doesn't serve where you're going. It lets go of the relationships that comfort your wounds but kill your growth. Because here's the hard truth. Not everyone deserves a seat in your becoming. Some people are allergic to your healing. Some are addicted to the version of you that stayed small so they could feel tall. But a decided mind doesn't shrink to keep company. It elevates even if it means walking alone. Because loneliness isn't the enemy, misalignment is. And if the cost of clarity is solitude, so be it. Let the silence be your sanctuary. Let the isolation be your initiation. This is what separates the almost from the absolute, the dabblers from the disciplined, the dreamers from the doers. It's not talent, it's not luck. It's the decision to go all in when it would be easier to blend in. That's where power lives. Power doesn't show up in the perfect plan. It shows up in the person who keeps showing up even when the plan falls apart, even when the door doesn't open, even when the timeline stretches longer than expected. You think it's taking too long? What if it's you that's been delaying the breakthrough by dancing with doubt? You say you're waiting on alignment, but alignment isn't something you find. It's something you decide. It's not the universe that's been unclear, it's your own hesitation echoing back at you. And every time you hesitate, you train the world to treat you as optional. You teach life to give you leftovers, but not anymore. This is the season where you move like your calling matters, where you no longer play small and call it humility, where you stop editing your greatness for other people's comfort. A decided mind doesn't ask, who am I to do this? It declares, who am I not to? Because if not you, who if not now, when you're not behind, you're not broken. You're just being asked to choose, to decide, to rise not when it's easy, but when everything in you screams to stay safe. That is the battleground of the exceptional. The inner war between the soul that remembers why you came here and the mind that's been trained to survive. And the only way to win is to decide, to finally decide. A decided mind isn't just powerful, it's disruptive. It walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere not by shouting, not by begging to be seen, but by being. Because when your energy is rooted in certainty, you don't chase, you attract. You don't plead, you command. You don't seek approval, you embody alignment. Look back at every person who ever changed the course of history. They all had one trait in common. Not talent, not timing, not luck, conviction. Thomas Edison was told over 1,000 times that his experiments were failures. But he wasn't experimenting for validation, he was decided. Henry Ford was mocked for thinking the average man could drive a motor car. But he wasn't building for applause, he was decided. Disney was fired for lacking imagination. Oprah was told she was unfit for TV. Even Lincoln failed in business, lost in politics, and broke emotionally more times than most would endure, but they were decided. And when you are decided, the laws of nature respond differently. People start showing up that weren't there before. Doors you knocked on for years suddenly open, not because they changed, but because you did. The world bends to boldness, and boldness begins in the privacy of a decision. Before anyone else sees it, before the results show up, before the momentum begins, there is always that one defining moment where you make a private vow to yourself. I will no longer betray my calling for comfort. I will no longer delay what destiny demands. I will no longer stay small so others feel safe, because I am done negotiating with mediocrity. And this is where most people fall short. They think becoming unstoppable means becoming emotionless. But strength doesn't come from the absence of fear. It comes from facing it and moving anyway. You want to know what separates the 1%? It's not money, it's decisions. The decision to endure when it would be easier to quit. The decision to speak truth when silence would protect your image. The decision to take the stairs when shortcuts scream your name. The decision to stay when it's lonely, to believe when it's illogical, and to build when there's nothing but a blueprint in your imagination. Every breakthrough is born from a decision. Every calling is unlocked by a choice. And every next level is waiting on one thing, not your perfection, not your timing, just your decision. Because when you decide, you realign your entire being to the outcome. And once your being aligns, your results must follow. No exception, no delay, no escape. This world is built to bend to those who no longer break under pressure. And that is what you were born for. You've flirted with greatness long enough. You've danced around purpose. You've entertained excuses, tolerated confusion, and babysat doubt like it was your destiny. But the clock doesn't care about your excuses, and your future won't wait for your comfort. If you want it, decide. Not halfway, not when it's convenient. Now, right here, right now. Burn the escape route. Cut the backup plan. Silence the committee in your head that still asks for permission. Your next chapter won't be written by your potential. It'll be written by your decision. They told you to wait for clarity. But clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from walking. It comes from choosing the mountain before you see the trail. It comes from acting like it's already yours before the world agrees. This is what most don't understand. Clarity is a reward, not a prerequisite. You get it after you move, not before. You build the bridge as you walk it. And while others pace the shores of safety, overthinking their way into stagnation, the ones who leap, they soar, because they've learned something sacred. A made-up mind is louder than doubt. A decided soul walks straighter than fear. When you decide, you tap into a power that breaks, cycles, reverses curses, and rewrites bloodlines. You stop playing small, not because you feel ready, but because you realize small was never your design. Look at nature. A seed doesn't apologize for becoming a tree. The moon doesn't dim itself on cloudy nights. The lion doesn't second-guess its roar. They just are what they were meant to be. So why are you still waiting for permission? Why are you still shrinking when God already crowned you? Why are you still explaining your calling to people who have never heard destiny speak? It's time to stop performing for people who can't see the future. You see, you're not meant to convince them, you're meant to lead them. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to make something undeniable. And to do that, you need to decide. Not dabble, not try, decide. Because the difference between average and extraordinary is not more talent. It's not better timing. It's a deeper decision. Average people want ease. Extraordinary people are obsessed with alignment. And alignment only comes when you eliminate what doesn't match your direction. Even if it hurts. Even if it's lonely. Even if it costs you applause, friendships, comfort, or identity. That's the price of living with power. And the people who get it. They don't just live differently, they carry differently. They walk like the future is already theirs. They speak like they've already won. They move like history's watching. Because it is. History is always watching the few who decide to stop talking about potential and become it. You want to change your life. Stop asking how long it'll take and start acting like it's already done. That's the energy heaven responds to. That's the posture of people who rewrite legacies. That's the final gear of a decided mind. It no longer flinches. It no longer waits. It no longer bargains. It just builds, day after day, word by word, brick by brick, even when it's quiet, even when it's dark, even when nothing seems to be working. Because a decided mind knows the results are inevitable. So now you stand at the edge, not of a cliff, but of a choice. Not just any choice, the choice. The one that separates the many from the few. The one that determines whether your future becomes a fact or a forgotten fantasy. Because right now, something inside you is being summoned. Not your comfort, not your convenience, but your conviction. The version of you that doesn't flinch. The version that no longer runs. The version that doesn't just dream, decides. And listen closely. Your life won't change because you listen to this voiceover. It won't shift because you nodded along. It won't transform because you felt something. It will only change if you become someone, if you wake up tomorrow and decide no more halfway living. No more excuses dressed as logic. No more rehearsing defeat in your mind and calling it caution. You weren't made to wonder what could have been. You were made to walk in what can't be denied. But it all starts here. One decision, one moment of spiritual aggression where you burn the back door, where you look your fears in the face and say, I'm not backing down, I'm becoming. Because the world has enough thinkers. It's drowning in planners, but it's starving for the decided. And those who decide, they don't wait for the door to open. They kick it off the hinges. They don't pray for the path, they pave it. They don't ask if they're worthy. They become worthy through action. So decide, right here, right now. Not tomorrow, not when it's easy, not when you're ready, now. Because your future doesn't respond to fear. It doesn't respond to delay. It doesn't respond to potential. It responds to decision. So take the step, start the project, end the cycle, say the hard truth, build the new you. Do the damn thing. Let the world adjust. Let heaven endorse it. Let history record it. But above all, let you become undeniable. Because this is the power of a decided mind. And once you walk in, truly walk in it, nothing can stop you. Not the doubt, not the critics, not even the past. Because destiny doesn't follow the loudest voice. It follows the most decided one. So what are you waiting for? Go, build, believe. Become.